I'll share my screen now as well.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second day of the HSE People virtual exhibition. This morning we have Julian Taylor, Head of Sales Enablement at She Software, and he's going to discuss with us why health and safety software fails. If at any point you'd like to ask any questions, then please do comment in the chat on the right-hand side. And all of this content's going to be available on demand after the event. Thanks very much, Julian.
Okay, that's great. So thanks, Rebecca. Thanks for the intro. And thanks for the opportunity to talk today. And it might seem very counterintuitive that you've got somebody from a software company here talking about why software might fail, but hopefully all will become clear and all will start to make sense as we go through the sort of discussion this morning. In terms of sort of She Software and who we are, we're a health and safety management system. So we really focus in on health and safety. That's our sole sort of reason in life. And we're really fortunate because of that, because we get to meet with lots of interesting people like you on a sort of daily basis. And by that, I mean people who work in health, safety and compliance. And as a team, we solely focus on health and safety. So it's really useful for us to have those conversations because we learn from everyone, and we sort of talk about lots of different elements around how we can improve and help to improve safety performance. Now, recently we had a presentation to our team from a consultant called Dawn Hemmings, who we've worked with in the past in sort of her previous existences. And it was a great presentation, and it prompted a lot of discussion. It was really encouraging because what Dawn was talking about very much aligned to the sort of thoughts that we have as an organization. But equally, it challenged some of the recent buzzwords and some of the concepts that people talk about within the safety world. And what I'd like to do today is just to talk through some of the sort of key points of that presentation and see how those correlate to implementing a software system, but also, I suppose, driving any other sort of major health and safety initiative or change program within an organization. So the presentation was called or entitled, "Is Behavioral Safety the Right Answer?" And it was the output of a master's dissertation. And my first question really was, so where did this sort of thought, where did this idea come from? And when Dawn was trying to find a topic for her dissertation, she was doing an MSc in EH&S. She wanted to sort of prove that behavioral safety wasn't a necessity to change a company's safety culture. And she identified really 4 key areas that need to be in place regardless to enable a company to change that safety culture or business culture. And this is prior to actually any major change program being put into place. So the 4 sectors, very simply, start with, I think some of these you would expect to see here, but they start with leadership engagement. And this is all about ensuring that safety is led from the top of the organization. And that includes lots of different things, but key amongst them is regular employee contact, but also an accountability for safety. And I think that's a really interesting one, and we'll talk about it more sort of later on. But it's good for maybe if you sit and reflect now on your own organizations and your own experiences, is that true leadership there at the top of the organization around health and safety? The next one, again, equally important, is employee engagement. So when we think about our employees, are they involved in safety activities? But also, are they empowered? So are they empowered to carry out activities? And probably most importantly, are they empowered to stop if they feel unsafe? I saw a really interesting presentation last year, and it was a lawyer who was making the presentation, but in a room probably of 150 safety professionals he asked the question, when was the last time you saw the job stopped because somebody raised a safety concern? And it was quite scary because not one hand went up in that room. So actually, are we empowering our employees to put their hand up and say stop? We think then about our safety management system. So, okay, it's there to ensure legal compliance. So are we achieving that? But also, have we got all the necessary policies and procedures in place? And do they work effectively for us as an organization? So have we tailored them to fit the way that we work? And then it's got here incident reporting. I'd probably change that and make that event reporting or just reporting. So actually, have we, through the other activities that we've done, have we created a culture where actually we capture all of the things that are going on? So incidents, hazards, near misses, those unsafe conditions or unsafe acts. And actually, that's a really critical part. And again, we'll come back to it in a moment, because actually, if we get that flow of information coming in, we can then analyze it and we can understand the real trends and understand what's really going on within our organization. Now, if we go back to thinking about the engagement piece again, I think one of the most important points or most important or most interesting discussion points was around actually thinking about the way that we talk about safety to our employees. And it was really talking about sort of changing or thinking about the way we promote it as either as safety as a priority, or should we actually change it to safety as a value? And this really resonated with me. So let's expand on that and think about it. And it's thinking about how we talk about and illustrate safety within our workplace. And what came out really was the need to stop saying that safety is a priority. Now, for a safety professional, again, that might seem counterintuitive and it might seem strange to say that. But if you think about it this way: when we say that safety is a priority, who are we saying it's a priority for? And generally, it's a priority for management, or it's a business priority. And commonly, if we stop and think about that for the broader employee base within an organization, that commonly doesn't resonate. So business priorities don't resonate with every employee that we've got. So people may switch off to the fact that actually safety is an important thing to be doing. So what we were talking about was really the importance of helping individuals to identify sort of the personal value of good safety. So actually having safety as a value. And that makes people want to do it. And again, thinking about this was thinking about how we then illustrate this, how we actually develop this and make it a personal thing to people. Now, I think it's quite interesting when I talk to safety professionals, because quite often they've got that personal experience which brought them into doing this in the first place. My personal story is I used to work quite a long time ago for an engineering business. And I'll be quite honest, I had very little awareness or interest in safety at that time. It was sort of, it was at a stage in my life when I hadn't really had this awareness brought to me. But it happened in the most tragic of ways, because one of the guys who worked for us went across to Ireland to do some maintenance work on a piece of equipment that we'd supplied. And this guy was working away on this piece of equipment, and somebody turned it on. And he lost his right arm in that incident. So he was a guy in his late 20s, early 30s. You think about the long-term implications for him, for his family, in his personal life, in his work life, and it's absolutely immense. And it really brings home in a very stark way the importance of safety. So that was probably the trigger point for me to start to take a real interest in health and safety. So we need to think about, how do we get that trigger point for our people? And there are some simple exercises that you can start to do and you can relate to their world. So a really nice example was just pick a pen up and get people to sign their names. So if you're sitting there and you've got a pen in front of you now, you could maybe pick the pen up You could sign your name, and actually it's quite an easy exercise, isn't it? Now, if I ask you to do the same thing, but actually what I want you to do is to tuck your thumb into the palm of your hand and then try and pick the pen up and sign your name, it becomes far more difficult, doesn't it? So we can start to illustrate to people, actually, what's the long-term implications if you were to lose a finger or a thumb in an industrial incident? And it might seem like relatively small, but it has a major impact. And again, we start to get people to think about all of the things that they take for granted, but we should value. So our eyes, our hearing, our hands, our arms, our legs, and ultimately our lives. And actually, this is all about getting people to think about, if it went wrong, what's the long-term implications? So actually, I need to start valuing safety. And the idea here is we get people to live and to breathe this. So the important question, I suppose, here is, or the big question is, how does this dissertation then translate into reality, into the real world? And key examples are things like, rather than dealing with safety in the standalone meetings, actually starting to integrate it. So actually the need for safety teams to be present in team or departmental meetings or leadership meetings to promote safety just as an integral part of what we do on a day-to-day basis. Additionally, I suppose aligned to that as well is moving away from the safety team carrying out activities or doing everything, and starting to give local people the tools and the ability to be able to carry out key elements of health and safety themselves. So we start to think about people doing inspections or risk assessments at a local level. So if we think about something like somebody using a forklift truck, the forklift truck operator does the pre-work inspection of that forklift truck. But what it does is helps people to really appreciate the local risks, the local hazards around them that they need to be aware of. So the title of this discussion is, why does health and safety software fail? So where's the correlation between what we've talked about so far and our theme? Well, I suppose the first thing to stress is that we don't promote software as a silver bullet that's going to solve all issues within an organization. And if I can compare your safety management system to a jigsaw, we see software as a really important piece within that jigsaw, because what it can do is it can start to drive efficiencies. It can underpin all of the activities, and importantly, pull them all together very simply in a central area, so that you've got visibility and you've got clarity about what's going on. But ultimately, the climate in your organization needs to be right if it's going to be effective and if it's going to work. So when we think about what we've talked about, and we think about the slide that we looked at earlier, particularly the piece around people engagement, whether it's leadership or whether it's employee engagement, if one or both of those things are missing, actually it's going to have an impact on the success of any rollout of a software or any change program. Now, the flip side of this is that actually the software can make a big contribution in terms of improving leadership and employee engagement, because what it can do is provide really easy to use tools, and it can provide accessible information. Now, what we've done here at She Software is actually developed our own model around this sort of concept, around these sort of theories, but it expands on the principles that we've discussed so far. And really, this model came about last year, and it came about because of a lot of the discussions and the themes that we'd seen at conferences. So the conversation I talked about earlier with the lawyer around, does the job stop? And also about it was driven from our experiences, because we visit with hundreds of organizations every year. And actually, it's really interesting seeing who's driving safety within those organizations. And commonly, it's the safety team who are there, and they're very dedicated and proactive. But actually, what's commonly missing is the thing at the top, which is leadership. And if we think about leadership, the right organization with the right leadership actually can have a really proactive effect and a really positive effect on safety performance, because it's open, it's encouraging, and it encourages thoughts, it encourages conversations, it encourages the generation of ideas. And what that does when we think about health and safety engagement actually is it encourages people to report things. So we talked about the reporting of events and hazards and so on. If we've got the right leadership at the top, actually people feel comfortable and they feel confident that they can do that. So by doing that, we talk about giving people a safety voice. So the ability to be able to simply and easily tell you about the things they've seen. And that can be positive or it could be developmental. What that does is actually then drives a flow of information. So we get this flow of data, this flow of information that's really useful to us as safety professionals, because we want to make the right decisions and we want to make good strategic decisions. Now, the next important piece is actually that data is easily usable. So rather than having to be converted into a spreadsheet or an Excel document, actually it simply flows into a modern business intelligence tool that makes it really easy for us to be able to drill into it and not just see the headlines, but actually start to see the underlying trends. From there, we can make those good decisions. So we can make informed decisions that actually drive continuous improvement. And if we think about that, this is what all of our standards and all of our sort of frameworks are designed to do. So if we think about something like ISO 45001, we think about HSG 65, we think about Plan, Do, Check and Act. It's all designed to do this, to drive continuous improvement. And it becomes self-fulfilling then, because leadership can start to see the value of investing in safety. And we've all heard it from many sources that actually safe sites tend to be the more profitable and the more efficient sites. So it encourages leadership to keep talking about safety, to keep promoting safety, and actually that drives further engagement. So it keeps going on around. Now, if we flip that around the other way, and we actually think about when leadership doesn't work, actually it starts to fail. And we think about why leadership doesn't work. It's often around style, or often around the discussions that are had. So if you think about, and I'm sure you've all experienced those organizations where maybe the leadership style is autocratic or maybe bullying, that has a direct and an immediate impact on that employee engagement. Because rather than people feeling comfortable to talk and to report and to tell you about things, actually people start to worry about actually what's going to be the reaction if I say something about this. So it stifles that flow of data, that flow of information. And sometimes this can be or can be completely unintentional. I think another sort of good way to think about this is think about what leadership talks about. So actually, if leadership is very focused on other metrics and other numbers other than safety, that's going to have an effect. So whether it's production numbers in a manufacturing organization, if it's sales figures within a sales organization, could be patient numbers in a healthcare situation. If leadership is really focused on those numbers and that's what they talk about all the time, people will prioritize that over safety. And what we see is that we disengage people, and immediately that flow of data will slow down, it will disappear. And then rather than making informed decisions, we're actually guessing at what it is we should be doing to drive improvement around health and safety. Now, if we think about that cycle, actually, it doesn't necessarily need to be leadership that disappears. Actually, even in a state of good leadership, we still need to be able to have the right tools to actually enable people to be able to do things effectively. So whether it's tools for our people to be able to report things, or whether it's efficient and easy to use reporting tools so that you can analyze the data, those things still need to be in place. So again, it's like this jigsaw that I talked about earlier, where we're trying to slot those pieces into place. So here at She Software, what we see is that the most successful implementations are where there's that positive culture. Culture underpins just about everything that we do in safety. So we need leaders to be encouraging reporting. We need them to be encouraging and promoting the use of systems. And our employees then understand the value and maybe the personal value of actually using them. And to support this, we might have to do things like internal marketing. So rather than just introducing a system by stealth, actually let's make it big bang. Let's promote it. Let's talk about it, and let's show that it's important to the overall business that this change is coming, and we get buy-in before a new system is launched. And we also talk about and wholly support a view, which is we want to promote, rather than a safety culture, we want to promote one culture. Where EH&S is just simply a part of our everyday activities. Because there's a danger that if you separate out safety culture from overall culture, it can become marginalized. And again, to illustrate this, again, I go back to the point I made a moment ago, which is actually if the business culture is absolutely focused on other metrics and other numbers, that will be more important and will be dealt with ahead of safety issues and safety culture. And also, again, if there's that negative culture, that's going to affect the attitude of the workforce and inherently their attitude to safety activities. So it's far better to integrate and influence just one overarching positive culture that then incorporates health and safety compliance. And when we think about this, the benefits are there's a multitude of benefits to this, because actually, as well as improving health and safety performance, what we tend to see is this overall improvement in terms of performance in other areas. And a great expression that I like to steal is really simple, which is we want people living and breathing safety just as an integral part of what they do. Now, when we think about culture, I think one of the important considerations of thinking about culture is to align our culture within the workplace to the general culture that we all experience across the rest of our lives. And if we want to encourage people to do safety activities, part of actually doing that is making it appealing and making it easy. So I always find it amazing that even in 2020, we still use pieces of paper and pens to report safety events. So I see things like near miss cards and safety observation cards. And actually, the culture that our people live in is not filling things out on pieces of paper and cards anymore. It's the ability to pull a phone out their pocket, maybe tap on an app, and actually do something really simply, easily, and quickly. And what that does is if we make safety or do safety that way, is it taps into people's everyday culture and actually changes the perception about the relevance of safety. Because again, if we're doing it on pieces of paper, how modern, how relevant is this thing that we're being asked to do? And when we talk about inclusivity, it also means the leadership team. So we want to encourage better behaviors from them. And we want to make it easy for them. So we want to provide them with tools and information that actually make it easier for them to talk about safety on a daily basis. So one of the things we talk about critically changing is a culture where health and safety professionals spoon feed the leadership with maybe a monthly or a quarterly report. And again, I'll ask you to think about that really simply, is if we report to senior leadership on a monthly basis, how often do they talk about safety? How often is it really in their focus? Compare that to the other key metrics that you have in your organization. How often do your senior leadership team talk about those metrics? And I'd suggest it's probably on a daily, if not more frequent basis. So what we should be doing is putting information, good information, in front of our leadership on a far more frequent basis, help them to understand what's the value of the information that we're presenting, so that actually it's easy for them to talk about safety on a daily basis, and actually, again, just make it an integral part of what we do. So more regular conversations and more reinforcement of safety. So to summarize, we've got to ensure that actually we've got the basics right. So whether it's behavioral safety, whether it's any other kind of change program, whether it's a piece of software that you're looking to implement, you've got to have the right culture, you've got to have the right foundations in place if it's going to be successful. So that starts with leadership. So we've got to coach the leadership, we've got to educate the leadership around the importance and the value of what it is that we're doing. And again, that might be something like a return on investment sort of discussion to show how it's actually going to drive efficiencies and improvements across the organization. But also then we need to draw our people in. So actually, how do we empower our people? How do we start to get them to understand the personal value of safety to them? So actually they're going to simply engage and they're going to want to start to use this thing that we're bringing to them. And that might also include this internal marketing, where we're actually going to start to promote, we're going to start to present around the business, and actually start to show what it is that we're going to do, and again, the value of it. I've got a personal crusade that I'm on, which is to help everybody to understand what KISS means. I've heard it sort of misquoted, and I used to misquote it, people saying, keep it simple, stupid. Actually, KISS came out of NASA, I think in the mid to late 60s. And it stands for keep it stupidly simple, which I think is sort of far less demeaning and actually is far more impactful for me, which is actually for any safety activity, whether it's a piece of software, whether it's a form, whether it's a process, keep it stupidly simple. If it's simple to do, quick, and it's easy, people are far more likely to do it and to engage with what it is that you're asking them to do. And finally, I think the thing here around is if we do this in the right way, it starts to build the credibility around the health and safety team and the value that you bring to the organization. So that credibility, once it's there, again, if we think back to that leadership cycle that we talked about, actually it's going to be massively useful next time you go to your leadership team to ask for investment in other health and safety activities, equipment, or processes. Now, at that point, I'm going to just hand back to Rebecca, and I'm going to see if we've had any questions as we've been going through. If you do want to see or find out a bit more about She Software, a couple of options. You could stop by our booth. I think we've got Tara and Kim who are in our virtual booth today, and they'd be happy to talk to you and to show you what we do. Or you could use the QR code that's in the top of the screen, and that will take you directly to our website where you can get some more information. But really interesting to see if we've had any questions, Rebecca.
Yes, we have actually. Someone has asked, can you tell us how technology can help with improved leadership engagement?
Okay, so again, good question. I think there's a couple of ways that it can work. So the first thing we've already touched upon, which is actually just presenting more information and better information to leadership on a more frequent basis. So what I'm thinking here is actually the leadership has their own dashboard. So it might have a range of metrics in there, lagging and leading, so we can start to sort of work in a proactive manner. We educate the leadership around what those metrics mean and how to use them. And actually that then just encourages them to think about and to talk about safety more regularly. Other things that we can do is through using things like mobile apps is that we can KPI or challenge our leadership to do things like safety tours or safety walks when they visit their teams or different sites. And we can start to get some metrics then around which of our leadership are engaged and are carrying out those activities. So we can go and coach and support and help the ones who aren't necessarily engaged at the start of it. But again, that just encourages more conversations and more profile around safety.
Fantastic. A quick follow-up actually to that, Julian. What suggestions do you have around improving rates?
Improving rates?
Yes, improving rates of usage by employees in an organisation. It's all very well giving them the tools, but how do you get them to actually use the tools?
Okay, so I think there's always an element here of training and coaching. So part of it is a challenge to us, which is to make it really simple and easy to use. And the idea where we want to get to is actually you don't need to train people, because you think about most apps in your personal life, you pick it up and you use it. But again, part of it is being present on the shop floor. It's being present in team meetings to promote why we're asking you to do this, the value of doing this, and actually just making it simple and easy. So when we create the forms that you're asking people to submit, minimize the number of fields that will be needed to fill in. The idea primarily of the sort of the mobile app in the first instance is tell us about things. We can then go and gather more information if we need it. What we commonly see is, in terms of reporting rates, is when we put a system in, it will go up anywhere from sort of 50% upwards in terms of the sort of reporting levels. The best we've ever seen was 200% increase in reporting levels once the system was in place. If we think about that the other way around, prior to that, if we're missing that information, we're kind of guessing at what it is that is really going on across our organisation.
Fantastic. That's great. Thank you, Julian. As you said, the booth is going to be manned today and tomorrow, and the contact details are up on the screen. Likewise, if anyone wants to ask any other questions, do email me and I'll pass them over to Julian and the SHE team. Thank you once again for your time. We really appreciate it. That was very insightful. And yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Rebecca, and thank you everyone for attending.